Hey guys, this is the Micro Deceiver, and I absolutely love this version of the fly. Originally, I was going to share with you the olive and pearl, but it's just not nearly as cool to look at as this brown version. And I'll put the material list in the description, so if you want to tie the olive, you can. So let's take a look at this fly. This fly moves and articulates like crazy in the water, and there's really two main things that do that. First is the tail, which is on a Flyman Company shank, micro shank on the back. And then up front, we've got a Just Add Water brush, which really moves the water around the fly itself and helps to just create a vortex and kick that rear tail around. The other thing that really makes this fly awesome is the deer hair that's in here and wrapped basically around the entire fly itself, which creates a neutral buoyancy. And I love to fish this fly in a top dropper position. So many of you guys know I like to fish two flies at a time. And so I put this fly up top, and with that deer hair, it just bobs, weaves, kicks, and just looks awesome. So as far as other materials, right? So we've got the partridge in the back. I've got a lateral line that's from Flashabou, Hedron Flashabou. I've got a little bit of ice stub to help keep the articulation clean on the back here. Some more partridge, then Palmer chenille in a tan, and then the deer hair, as I mentioned, and then Just Add Water brush. And all together, it just makes an awesome fly. So, without further ado, let's get tying. All right, so let's get tying. I'm going to start with a fish skull, micro spine, and this is a tail shank. And I'm tying with my Vivus 100 thread. Alright, so next I'm going to use some feathers off of a grouse skin. I just picked some off of there. Now that I've got the feathers, I just need about half an inch or so, so I'm going to preen the materials back. And you can use a hen hackle here if you want. It certainly doesn't have to be partridge, just something brown. Personally, I just love the modeling from the grouse feather itself. It just looks absolutely gorgeous. And to save a little time and frustration, now that I've got them stripped, I've just grabbed a pair of needle nose and I'm just going to come in and pinch those barbs down. What it does when we put it on the shank, it just helps keep everything aligned and saves you aggravation with those feathers trying to roll around that tail shank. I'm just facing the feathers together, and it's okay if they're not, perfectly aligned. They look good though. Hold them on the same side of the hook, come around, a couple loose wraps, just to get the materials into position where I want them. And now I'm going to come forward, crank down, and just get a couple wraps in with those stems bended back, just again to help secure that feather. Okay, so those look really good. Next, a little bit of Hedron lateral scale. This is the fine material. Just cut off one piece. I'm gonna put about 2 inches on one side, the rest of the material out the other. Just wrap it right down the shank and get out about 1/8 of an inch beyond the feathers. Give it a clip off. I'm going to come back with the remaining amount of material, bend it right over, pinch, come back to the other side, and just run it right down the feather. Same thing, about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch out the back, give it a clip. Alright, so now, back to my partridge, just going to grab a larger feather. Try to pay attention to where you're grabbing the feathers, because you're going to grab another in just a minute, and you're going to want it to be a little bit larger and be a little bit webbier. Okay, so what I'm looking for here is not the nice part, I would say, of the feather. I want kind of the marabou. So I'm saving just about 1/4 of an inch of the feather, and I've cut a triangle into the front of it, and I'm just going to tie that triangle in and walk down the shank to where my 2 feathers are tied in. The idea here is only to cover those back 2 feathers, so I'm just going to preen the materials back and come forward. Got to make sure my thread is out of the way. And I'm going and leaving just a little bit of a space in between each one of the sequential wraps. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to come behind the material twice. There's once. You notice I'm wiggling that thread just to try to make it go through without capturing a lot of materials. That's 2. Next, wrap in front a couple times just to lock those materials into place. Flip this feather off, and now I'm going to come in with a little bit of super glue on here. This happens to be medium zap, and I'm just going to hit the thread maybe about an inch worth, and I'm not even going to whip finish. You guys can whip finish if you want. I find with the super glue, once I get it locked in, it's in. Good. Take my razor blade and just pop that off. Again, be careful not to get the rest of your materials. Okay, next I'm going to use a little bit of Orvis Super Strong Mono. That happens to be 25 pound, and I'm just going to use about 2 inches, come up through, and just leave it like that. Alright, next, one of my favorite hooks, a Daiichi 2460, size number 6, and I'm still using Vivis 100, and that's gel spun. So I'm going to grab my tail shank and trying to make sure that the mono does not crisscross. You can see there how that looks. I'm just going to lightly tie it in, just making sure again that the mono, you got the top piece which is running on top, bottom's on bottom, looks good, and you notice the distance, it's very tight in there. And I'm just going to run right up the hook. And I'm not going to go all the way. I'm going to leave myself some space. Fold that mono over, come back, clip the excess off. And now I'm going to do 2 things. One, I'm going to continue to go down to get the gap the way that I want, which is just about 1 or 2 hook lengths, or sorry, 1 or 2 eye lengths, which you can see it's a very small gap in the back there, which looks good. And the second thing I'm going to do now is hit this with a little bit of super glue. And this is Zap-A-Gap. And this is Zap-A-Gap Thin. This Zap-A-Gap Thin goes a long way, so be very careful when you put it on there. And you can use any super glue. Again, we're just trying to lock that mono in. Okay, next I'm going to use some Ice Dub UV Tan, and I'm going to use this material basically to create a ball right off the back of the hook here. And what the ball is going to do is going to help keep my rear cover, which is going to be another partridge feather, from going directly over that articulation. And the reason why I do that is to ensure that the articulation continues to swing and to move freely, and that my back covering doesn't actually interfere with it. I don't want that feather going directly on top of that articulation. I'm just going to pinch it out of the way. Okay, I'm grabbing my partridge again, and I'm grabbing a feather that's further up the body, because again, I want to create that taper. So I want it to be larger than the last feather. So you can see there it is. Again, I want that webby material. I'm not worried about what I would say is that nice material up front. So I'm just going to peel back, clip, create that little triangle there again, wrap it in, and I'm going to let that feather dictate which way it wants to be wrapped. I'm just grabbing some clips and I'm just going to wrap forward. Now I'm going to end up wrapping right back over top of this, so it doesn't really matter. You just want those feathers to go back. You don't want them to wrap or get stuck on the hook. So just take your time to get them so that they're sitting up. All right. Looks nice. Clip off the stem. Preen everything back. And you can see how nice that covers the articulation space without actually impeding, and it's really important when that gets wet. Okay, next I've got a little bit of medium palmer chenille. This happens to be in tan. And I'm just going to tie that in. And the nice thing about the medium is that you don't have to trim it. I'm just going to tie it in place, and I'm going to leave myself about 1/4 of an inch up front. And I'm just going to wrap forward, and you notice I'm not putting them right on top of each other. I'm leaving a little bit of a space as I come forward. Okay, that's it for the palmer chenille. 2 behind, 2 in front. Tie everything down. Looks good. So I'm back to my partridge feather, and I'm just going to grab another larger feather off of it. And again, I'm just going to preen the materials back. I'm going to create that little triangle. I'm going to go under, wrap it down. Just getting that feather in place. Preen the materials back and wrap forward. All I'm trying to do here is create a little bit of a cover. I'm going to go maybe 3 or 4 wraps. I just want something that when it gets wet, it kind of blends over that chenille. So coming behind once, coming behind twice. Clip that excess off. Pull the materials back. Looks good. I'm just going to wrap down. Okay, coming back just a little bit more to basically where that palmer chenille is tied in. And you can see how that covers up that palmer chenille really nice. Okay, next, I've got an old bucktail lying around, and really it doesn't matter. If you've got a tan, perfect. I don't happen to have a tan, but if you look at the back of all your bucktails, you have a huge amount of tan off the back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch myself about a matchstick quantity. So I just clipped it right off of the bottom here. And what I'm going to do now is get rid of the excess material, and I'm going to preen out what I would consider some of the debris. Now, all I want from this deer hair are the tips itself, and so I'm just going to pinch them with my fingers, pull up and continue to do that process, just trying to line the tips up. And they don't have to be perfect, but you do need to have the majority of the materials in there. You can also use a hair stacker if you would like. Now, this isn't enough material, so I'm going to have to apply it twice, but I want the tips of the deer hair to go back to just about where the articulation is. And I'm also not going to worry about reverse tying. I'm just going to go over once, twice, pull down tight with that GSP, do one more, and now I'm going to clip the excess off. And like I said, there's not quite enough here. You got to do it a little bit by eye. Grab the deer hair again, just grab a couple more tips. I'd say I grabbed about half a matchstick worth. Preening everything out, just making sure that I have the right amount of material, measuring with those other tips. I want this to go down below. That looks good. I'm just going to come over top, tie down, and take a look to make sure that I've got a nice distribution of the deer hair itself. That looks good. All right, very good. Now, in order to secure everything into place, I'm going to take the Zap-A-Gap thin, and I'm just going to hit right where I just tied in. Again, be careful with this stuff, with any super glue, because it can go through your materials real quick. All right, next, I've got a streamer brush. This is from Just Add Water, and the color here is bronze back. So I'm going to prep the brush real quick just by hitting it with a lighter, just to get those materials back. You see how it cleaned it really nice, quick and easy. Makes it easy to tie in. And now I'm just going to go through and I'm going to wrap the brush. The best part about this brush, the more wraps you put on, the more resistance you'll have in the water and the greater movement you'll get with the fly. What I try to get is between 3 and 4 wraps. And that's 3, and I'm just going to come through for number 4. That looks good. 2 wraps from behind. Again, wiggling that thread. That's 1 and 2. Pull everything back, come in front, couple wraps. Grab an old pair of junky scissors and clip. Alright, so I'm just gonna hit this thread with a little bit of medium zap. Any super glue will work. The first inch. You get this on the thread and you wrap it up front. You don't have to worry about that material going anywhere. It's great. Alright, hit it with a little super glue. Velcro the materials out. And I probably should have before I hit it with glue, but I'm just going to put a little bit of magic marker on there. It's just a Copics brown. Looks nice. I'm just going to hit it with a little bit of Velcro. Just get all those fibers out. Anyway, that's the Lafkas single, and I hope that helps you out.